In 2021, Natasha had a very interesting idea to create a separate YouTube channel that would be called Jazz Chat with David Friesen.
I think it will be a wonderful project.
There was another project that Natasha and I did together. And I say Natasha, her name is Natalie, and Natasha is the other name that comes from Natalie, like Robert and Bob. So, she had a great idea for an e-shop. During the COVID-19 pandemic time, in the lockdown, I had to come up with a lot of different projects to try to make a living. And one of those projects was an e-shop that had the essential tools, I thought, for the jazz musician student and also the jazz musician professional. It's called David Friesen Jazz Education, and it has all my lecture series, provides Zoom lessons, all my CDs, not all of them, but quite a few of them, and sheet music to go along with some of the songs on the CDs. There's also a dollar store just to see the quality that I have on this e-shop. It's very user-friendly, and there's just a lot of good information, I think, that I have worked through all the info and teaching things I have. In 2021, I came up with a lecture series called the Christian Musician Lecture Series, and dealing with Christian musicians as a jazz musician, part of the Christian community. And when I talk about Christians, I'm talking about those people that know Christ in their lives and that follow Jesus and his teachings in the Bible. It's a difficult situation sometimes for Christian musicians. We find ourselves playing in diverse situations, in bars and clubs, places where there's drugs, and how do we rationalize that? How can we do something like that? Well, I explained that in the lecture series. We were called to serve, and we go to those that are in need of help, not to those that don't need any help. There's the condemnation from the church that Christian musicians have to deal with, and learning how to persevere in that type of situation, you know. The crying you hear in the background, because it's a live documentary, is very much like the torment we go through inside as musicians, with that condemnation we have to live with. And I explain a lot about my own personal life, how I overcame that, and really give a lot of practical suggestions how to overcome that condemnation, and discovering why we were created. Why are we playing music? Who created music? Why why we have that desire in our hearts to play music. And I explore all those kind of questions that I think will thoroughly, if a person gets these lecture series and really listens, will help solve a lot of problems for the individual jazz musician, give more direction, offer more hope, and confidence in what the Christian musician is doing. So I trust that there are musicians out there that will take advantage of this. A Christian is a person that has confessed Christ as their personal Savior. As Paul said, anything other than faith is a sin. Some of the swift judgments coming from the Christian community that I was playing, jazz, that's part of my experience, how I was able to differentiate between entertainment and a real spiritual relationship with the living God. We had a YouTube project that was quite inventive that my personal assistant Natasha came up with, and it was on Mondays we would have coffee jazz, people having a cup of coffee or tea, and I would pick a selection of the music to be played during that time. It was intimate, it was casual, it was just a nice time to spend time hearing some of my original music with some great players playing it. On Wednesday there was an event called Jazz Stories, where I would reminisce and talk about some interesting stories, events that happened to me, and there were many, while I was on the road playing music in various countries I was in. I can think of them now, and some really humorous stories. And this happened several years ago, back in the 70s. It might even have been the late 60s. Yeah, probably the late 60s. I had been doing the Ken Morris stage band camp in Portland, Oregon, of which Jamie Aebersold was teaching, John LaPorta, Mary McPartland, Gary Burton, and several other great musicians. And I had a concert at Portland State with Mary McPartland. I forget who the drummer was now. An evening concert, and I had cut my finger. So I wrapped it up with some gauze and put a Band-Aid and tape on it. It was a little bulky, but it was okay. It didn't interfere with my playing. And so we did the concert. During the concert, I was playing a solo, and it was pretty intense. And I guess my hands were going very fast over the strings, and I had an afro at that time, so my head was bopping, and it was probably quite a visual scene. Right in the midst of my solo, I heard like a gasp from the audience, like a it caught me off guard, but I wasn't really paying that much attention to the audience when I was soloing, so I heard it, but I continued playing, never thought more about it. And then after the concert, I talked to a friend of mine, and I said, "Did you hear a gasp during the time I was soloing?" He says, "Yes, David. It was quite an event." He said, you were playing so fast over the strings, all of a sudden we saw what looked like a missile flying through the air from your hand into the audience, and we thought your finger had come off." I started laughing. What it was the tape that I had on my finger that flew off and sailed in the air and probably looked like a finger to the people. I thought, oh my goodness, he's playing so fast. He's lost one of his fingers. It's a funny story, something that happened. Then on Fridays, there was a interview, jazz interview with some of the great jazz players of our time, and also Diane Cannon, a great actress, was interviewed by myself. It's recording now. Well, hello and welcome to Jazz Chat with David Friesen.
Do people know that we're brother and sister?
I don't know. I didn't mention it right now, but we are. We have been for many years, since the beginning. This was very kind of diverse, interesting selection of musical events that was to help capture the attention of people so they could see what I was doing, you know. Bright, I first met you when I was teaching at the Jamie Abersol Jazz Camp in Louisville a few years ago. And you had come over from Lagos to attend this camp. Other plans to come back to this country?
Yes, I do.
Welcome, Igor. Long time no see.
But I was thinking of you all the time, and I thought we saw each other somewhere, or we spoke on the phone.
I know.
But we didn't meet since then.
And we had such a nice, I remember we had a nice rapport in the bandstand. We were so amazed to hear someone so young play so great, you know, and Paul Horn kept talking about you after the He said, man, did you hear that Igor Bootman play? I saw your performance that you did at my Miami Dade.
Yeah.
And a nice group, wonderful guitarist and drummer and bassist. Is this your regular group?
Yes. So I have Ike Sturm on bass, Jesse Lewis on guitar, and Jared Schoenig is my drummer typically, but he is in California right now. So I was very lucky that Michael W. Davis was available to play the show. So, but those guys I've known for years. They're kind of my brothers. I see them as my brothers. And
let me just open up with a question that people will be interested in, and I've asked Bright Game from Nigeria and a conductor from Kiev, Ukraine, the same questions all around the world. How are you coping? How are you coping as a musician and educator with this COVID-19?
Well, I started practicing more, that's for sure.
In Dallas, Texas. I think it was April. No, not April. It was January. I went down to Dallas to play with Paul to do some gigs. We had about 4 or 5 gigs, and then I did a teaching at the University of North Texas State. We had a good time playing there. I came back from Dallas. I had about a 3 or 4 day layover before I was to catch a flight to Phoenix to teach there at Mesa Community College, Glendale Community College, and Arizona School for the Arts, and then do, I think, 3 or 4 concerts with my trio, Circle 3 Trio with Charlie Doggett and Joe Maness. I felt ill. I didn't feel good. I went and got tested and discovered I had COVID. And that's the last thing I remember. My daughter told me that my wife, Kim, had called her and said, David's not going to make it. It's impossible. He's not eating. I was delirious. I can't remember anything that had happened. And my daughter, Janelle, said that my wife, Kim, was spoon feeding me, making smoothies for me, trying to get some kind of food into my body. And after a week and a half of being delirious, I finally woke up and had lost 25 pounds. But I was alive. I was alive. I had lost 25 pounds in about a week and a half, and I don't remember anything. That evening, I met Kim in the hallway, and she said she was feeling horrible and that she should go to the hospital. And this is something she never did. She didn't like hospitals and didn't like to go to doctors. So I knew something was definitely wrong. She says, I hope I didn't catch your COVID. I drove her to Providence Hospital near our home in Portland, Oregon. Let her out, and they put her in a wheelchair and wheeled her in. And that was the last time I saw her whole. The COVID patients were not allowed guests in their room. For a week I was on the phone calling all the time, and I'm sure I was very disruptive to their hospital ways. Finally, we got permission from Kim's doctor, who is, I think he was Iranian. Very nice man. Very nice man who was so sorry for the rules of not allowing patients in to see, not allowing guests in to see the patients, rather. Ultimately, what happened was that Janelle, my daughter, David, my son, Toby, my son, and myself, we were all allowed up there at the bedside of Kim. And there we were as a family, and the kids and I were singing for Kim, and we were with her last 15, 16 hours of life. And she passed on February 19th, 2022. And my life has taken a definite left-hand turn after 58 years of marriage. It is an extraordinary loss for me. But I see a daylight ahead on the horizon. Something very, very special. Despite the death of my wife, that I will be sharing at a later date, that I think we can all rejoice in. I wrote this tune for my late wife, Kim Friesen, who passed last February 19th, 2022. I wrote this a few days after her passing. I call it Return to the Father. Kim was an ardent writer. She was seeking God and reading the Bible and praying and receiving little parables in her life that she would write down in a book, and of which I will be reading every day on a series, The Christian Writings of Kim Friesen, read by myself. My musical career, in part, was due to her generosity. Not one time in 58 years that I knew my wife, Kim, did she ever say one negative thing about my traveling and playing concerts. Wherever I would go, to Nigeria, to China, to Japan, back to New York, to Europe, to the Ukraine, to Russia, many places that I had traveled to, never once. And she would write me a little note, a little letter that I would take with me that would encourage me. Because I'm pretty domesticated, even though I chose a profession where I must travel a lot. Still, I was still missing home. I even have an album called Long Trip Home. The moment I left my house, it was a long trip home. But Kim encouraged me. We really owned the telephone company. We spent so much money in the early years. Now we have Skype and we have WhatsApp, and it's talk for free. We didn't have that at that time, way back when. Kim was an amazing mother to our 4 children. We lost a child. We lost Scott in 2010 when he was 44. And that was difficult. But we went through it together, and we're able to stand on our feet and battle through it. We had many good times. There were bad times, difficult times, as there is in any marriage. But Kim and I knew the power of forgiveness. Christ died for our sins, we believe. And we're called to love one another. And the epitome of love is forgiveness. It's very easy to love someone when everything's going fine, but as soon as you are offended or things get difficult, what people usually do is get divorced. And Kim and I learned to forgive one another and to persevere. And this was probably the greatest thing about our marriage of 58 years, was the perseverance, was the faith in the Lord, just the forgiveness, and even when times were very difficult. I will miss her dearly for the rest of my life, I am sure. I'm expecting to keep on playing music. It's what Kim would want me to do. My dear wife of 58 years. What a blessing it has been. And a foundation for the future for myself. And with that, I'd like to welcome all of you to tune in to the Christian writings of Kim Friesen when you have a chance, and to receive the beauty and the gospel truth of what you receive from the Lord. At all times, Christ is in the center. Was going to be evacuated. Yeah, so Kim and I had a nice concert last night, but due to the fires, right?
Yeah, attendance wasn't so great, but the people who were there were very grateful.
Yeah, we're surrounded by these wildfires, and but this is such a beautiful place, Las Vegas, New Mexico, which was before Las Vegas, Nevada.